From the icy tundra of Siberia to the bustling streets of Moscow and St. Petersburg, Russia's story spans more than 1,000 years of sweeping change. What began as a loose federation of Slavic tribes along Europe's eastern frontier grew into a vast empire that once stretched across 2 continents, survived Mongol domination, and forged a powerful Tsardom. It became a revolutionary Soviet superpower and, after the Soviet Union's collapse, re-emerged as a modern nation still grappling with its imperial past and global ambitions. This is the epic journey of a land whose history is marked by resilience, reinvention, and an enduring quest to define its place between East and West. Long before Russia became a unified state, the broad forests and riverlands of Eastern Europe were home to scattered East Slavic tribes mixing with Finnic and Baltic peoples. By the 9th century, these groups had formed a loose confederation along major trade routes between the Baltic and Black Seas. Tradition holds that in 862, a Varangian prince named Rurik was invited to rule Novgorod, founding the region's first dynasty. About 20 years later, in 882, Prince Oleg of Novgorod seized Kiev, joining the northern and southern Slavic lands into a single realm known as Kievan Rus, often regarded as the cradle of both Russian and Ukrainian history. Under Oleg's successors, especially Vladimir the Great and his son Yaroslav the Wise, Kievan Rus reached a golden age. In 988, Vladimir made a pivotal decision. He adopted Byzantine Christianity as the official faith, forging a lasting cultural and spiritual bond with the Byzantine Empire. This conversion introduced the Cyrillic script, church architecture, and religious art, blending Byzantine, Slavic, and Norse influences into a distinct Old Russian culture. Kiev blossomed into a cosmopolitan hub of trade and learning on the Dnieper River, where merchants from Scandinavia, Europe, and Byzantium exchanged furs, wax, honey, and slaves. Yet the federation of principalities remained fragile, and as Kiev's authority waned, regions such as Novgorod and Vladimir Suzdal grew in power. In the 12th and 13th centuries, the state faced its greatest peril. Mongol forces led by Batu Khan, a grandson of Genghis Khan, swept westward. Between 1237 and 1240, they devastated the cities of Kievan Rus, sacking Kiev itself in 1240 and shattering the once mighty realm. Most Russian principalities were forced to pay heavy tribute to the Mongol Golden Horde during a period remembered as the Mongol Yoke, which lasted for more than 2 centuries. Amid the destruction, however, new northern centers quietly rose, most notably the small town of Moscow, destined to lead the next chapter of Russian statehood. The Mongol invasion left a lasting mark on the Russian lands. For generations, the Khans of the Golden Horde extracted heavy tribute and held suzerainty over the fractured Rus' principalities. Some areas retained limited autonomy by accommodating the conquerors. Novgorod, for example, avoided destruction through negotiation, and its Prince Alexander Nevsky became a national hero by cooperating with the Horde while repelling Western invaders. Farther east, the modest Grand Duchy of Moscow began to stand out. Moscow's princes gained the trust of the Khans as dependable tax collectors, using that role to expand their authority over neighboring territories. By the 14th century, Muscovy was growing in strength. In 1380, Prince Dmitry Donskoy led a coalition of Russian princes to a symbolic victory over the Mongols at the Battle of Kulikovo. Mongol dominance continued, but the triumph inspired hopes of liberation. Over the next century, Moscow's influence expanded as the Horde weakened. In 1480, Grand Prince Ivan III refused to pay tribute and faced the Mongols in a bloodless standoff at the Ugra River, traditionally seen as the end of Mongol rule. By then, Moscow had absorbed rivals like Tver and Novgorod, and Ivan adopted the title Sovereign of all Rus. His marriage to Sophia Paleologina, niece of the last Byzantine emperor, strengthened Moscow's claim as the Third Rome, successor to Rome and Constantinople as the center of Eastern Orthodoxy. After the Mongol yoke was cast off, Moscow transformed rapidly. A centralized administration took shape, and the Grand Princes set about uniting the remaining petty principalities. The Kremlin, rebuilt in stone, became both the political capital and the seat of Orthodox leadership. By the early 1500s, Moscow had emerged as the core of a sovereign Russian state, poised to project its power and imperial ambitions far beyond the forests of its origin. In 1547, Ivan IV, grandson of Ivan the Great, was crowned Tsar of all the Russias, a title meaning Caesar or emperor. Known to history as Ivan the Terrible, he transformed medieval Muscovy into the Tsardom of Russia. Ivan expanded the realm by conquering the Tatar Khanates of Kazan and Astrakhan, securing the Volga River and access to the Caspian Sea, and he encouraged Cossack explorers like Yermak to push across the Urals into Siberia. Yet his reign was infamous for paranoia and cruelty. He created the Oprichnina, a private domain enforced by secret police who terrorized the boyars and commoners, and in a violent outburst, he killed his own heir. When Ivan died in 1584, only his weak, childless son Fyodor I remained. Fyodor's death in 1598 ended the centuries-old Rurikid dynasty. Russia then descended into the time of troubles, 1598 to 1613, years of famine, civil war, and foreign intervention. Polish-Lithuanian forces occupied Moscow and backed impostor czars until a popular uprising, led by merchant Kuzma Minin and Prince Dmitry Pozharsky, expelled them in 1612. The next year, a national assembly, the Zemsky Sobor, chose Michael Romanov, a 16-year-old nobleman and son of a prominent churchman, as the new czar. His election founded the Romanov dynasty, which would rule for 3 centuries. With Michael and his father acting as co-regents, order was gradually restored and foreign troops withdrawn. Throughout the 17th century, Russia remained an agrarian, serf-based society, but steadily expanded eastward. Traders and Cossacks claimed Siberia for the Tsar, reaching the Pacific by the century's end. The era also saw unrest, including Stenka Razin's Cossack Revolt of 1670, a major uprising of peasants and minorities along the Volga that was ultimately crushed, but revealed deep social tensions. Despite such upheavals, the Romanovs strengthened central authority and cautiously modernized the state. By the late 1600s, Russia was still a vast, semi-medieval realm, poised for sweeping transformation under Michael's dynamic grandson, Peter the Great. At the dawn of the 18th century, Peter the Great set out to make Russia a European power. Co-ruler from 1682 and sole ruler after 1696, Peter traveled to Western Europe in disguise to study shipbuilding, brought foreign experts to Russia, and reorganized the state along centralized absolutist lines. He curtailed the old boyar nobility with a new table of ranks, modernized the army and navy, and introduced Western technology and customs. Victory over Sweden in the Great Northern War, 1700 to 1721, highlighted by the Battle of Poltava, 1709, gave Russia access to the Baltic. Peter founded a new capital, St. Petersburg, and in 1721 proclaimed the Russian Empire, taking the title of emperor. His often harsh reforms signaled Russia's pivot toward Europe and left it a major continental power. After Peter's death, 1725, decades of unstable succession followed until Catherine the Great seized power in 1762. A German-born princess, she embraced Peter's modernizing legacy and the ideals of the Enlightenment, corresponded with French philosophes, and promoted education and the arts. Catherine expanded the empire dramatically, securing Crimea from the Ottomans and participating in the partitions of Poland, 1772, 1793, 1795, that brought large parts of Ukraine, Belarus, and Lithuania under Russian rule. By her death in 1796, Russia stood among Europe's great powers. The early 19th century tested that status. In 1812, Napoleon's invasion met disaster as Russian scorched earth tactics and winter destroyed the Grande Armée. Tsar Alexander I then joined the coalition that defeated Napoleon and sent Russian troops into Paris in 1814, giving Russia a decisive voice at the Congress of Vienna, 1815. Yet the vast empire lagged behind industrializing Europe, and debates raged between Westernizers and Slavophiles over the country's path. Russia's weaknesses were exposed in the Crimean War, 1853 to 1856, prompting Tsar Alexander II to launch sweeping reforms. In 1861, he abolished serfdom, freeing tens of millions of peasants, and followed with local self-government, zemstvos, judicial modernization, and economic measures. Radical groups, however, deemed these steps insufficient. Alexander II was assassinated in 1881. His successors slowed reforms even as industrialization accelerated. Railroads like the Trans-Siberian and new factories transformed cities while rural poverty persisted. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Russia faced mounting unrest. Reactionary policies under Alexander III and Nicholas II, combined with rapid social change, fueled revolutionary movements. Defeat in the Russo-Japanese War, 1904 to 1905, humiliated the empire and triggered the 1905 revolution after bloody Sunday protests were crushed in St. Petersburg. Nicholas II granted a constitution and created the State Duma, but soon curtailed its powers. Russia entered the 20th century as an immense, partly modernized empire, industrializing yet autocratic, poised for the upheaval that World War I would soon unleash. When World War I began, Imperial Russia, aligned with Britain and France, was poorly prepared for modern industrial warfare. Crushing battlefield defeats and severe shortages at home led to economic collapse and mass hunger. By March 1917, protests over food in Petrograd erupted into a nationwide uprising. Tsar Nicholas II abdicated, ending more than 3 centuries of Romanov rule. A liberal provisional government took power, but kept Russia in the war and failed to deliver land reform or peace, fueling further unrest. In October 1917, November 7th new calendar, Vladimir Lenin and the Bolsheviks staged a coup in Petrograd, toppling the provisional government and declaring rule by workers' soviets. To end the war, Lenin signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk in early 1918, surrendering vast territories to Germany. Almost immediately, a brutal Russian civil war erupted between the Bolshevik Reds and anti-communist Whites, which included monarchists, moderate socialists, and foreign backers. The Reds, organized by Leon Trotsky, enforced war communism, requisitioning grain and nationalizing industry, while the Cheka secret police crushed opposition. Fighting, famine, and disease killed an estimated 7 to 10 million people, but by 1921, the Bolsheviks had secured most of the former empire. In 1922, Lenin created the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, joining Russia with Ukraine, Belarus, and the Transcaucasian republics under a one-party communist regime based in Moscow. Industry, banks, and land were nationalized, laying the groundwork for a planned economy. After Lenin's death in 1924, a power struggle ended with Joseph Stalin dominant by the late 1920s, poised to drive rapid industrialization and collectivization that would reshape and scar the Soviet state. After the Civil War's devastation, Lenin introduced the new economic policy to revive the economy. But once Joseph Stalin consolidated power, he launched the first five-year plan, 1928, to force rapid industrialization and agricultural collectivization. Giant steel mills, dams, and factories rose, while peasants were herded into collective farms. Resistance was crushed, grain requisitioned, and the 1932 to 1933 famine, especially in Ukraine, killed millions. In the Great Terror of the late 1930s, hundreds of thousands were executed or sent to the Gulag as Stalin purged party, army, and society. Despite the brutality, the USSR became a major industrial power by the late 1930s. World War II was the ultimate test. After signing the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, 1939, with Nazi Germany, Stalin was shocked when Hitler invaded in June 1941. The ensuing Great Patriotic War was catastrophic. German forces besieged Leningrad and reached Moscow. Soviet industry relocated east, and the Red Army turned the tide at Stalingrad, 1942 to 1943, then advanced west, capturing Berlin in May 1945. The victory cost at least 25 to 30 million Soviet lives, but left the USSR occupying much of Eastern Europe. Moscow installed communist regimes across the region, forming the Soviet bloc. The post-war world split into rival camps, beginning the Cold War. The USSR tested its own atomic bomb in 1949, countered NATO with the Warsaw Pact, 1955, and clashed with the West in crises such as the Berlin Blockade, 1948 to 1949, and Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962. After Stalin's death, 1953, Nikita Khrushchev denounced the dictator's crimes in 1956 and eased repression during the thaw, while spectacularly advancing the space race with Sputnik, 1957, and Yuri Gagarin's flight, 1961. From the mid-1960s through the early 1980s, Leonid Brezhnev's rule brought the so-called era of stagnation. The USSR kept nuclear parity and backed communist movements worldwide, most notably invading Afghanistan in 1979. But its planned economy slowed and corruption spread. By the 1980s, the strain was clear. Mikhail Gorbachev rose to power in 1985, introducing perestroika and glasnost. Greater freedom of expression exposed deep problems and fueled nationalist movements in the Baltic republics and beyond. Gorbachev reduced Cold War tensions with arms control deals and declined to use force as communist governments across Eastern Europe collapsed in 1989 and the Berlin Wall fell. These upheavals fatally weakened the Soviet system, setting the stage for the USSR's dissolution in 1991. By the early 1990s, Mikhail Gorbachev's reforms had weakened the Communist Party and emboldened democratic and nationalist movements. In June 1991, Boris Yeltsin won election as President of the Russian Republic on a platform of radical change. Hardline communists attempted an August 1991 coup to oust Gorbachev, but mass resistance in Moscow, led by Yeltsin, forced its collapse and shattered Gorbachev's authority. Republics rapidly declared independence, and in December 1991, the leaders of Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus dissolved the USSR, creating the Commonwealth of Independent States. Gorbachev resigned and the Soviet Union ceased to exist on December 31, 1991, with the Russian Federation inheriting the UN seat and nuclear arsenal. Independent Russia faced economic and political chaos. Yeltsin's shock therapy market reforms, rapid privatization and price liberalization triggered hyperinflation, a GDP drop of over 40%, and widespread poverty. Former Soviet insiders acquired vast assets, becoming the notorious oligarchs, while crime and corruption soared. A 1993 power struggle led Yeltsin to use army tanks against parliament, and separatist pressures erupted into the brutal Chechen Wars, 1994 to 1996 and 1999 to 2000. Despite turmoil, Russia experienced new freedoms, a lively press, competitive elections, and the rise of civil society. Weakened by illness and unpopularity, Yeltsin resigned on December 31, 1999, naming Vladimir Putin, a former KGB officer, as acting president. Elected in 2000, Putin moved quickly to restore order. Rising oil prices fueled economic recovery, improved living standards, and allowed Russia to repay debts. He curbed the political power of oligarchs, brought national TV under state control, and centralized authority, presenting himself as the leader who would raise Russia from its knees. By the mid-2000s, Russia again projected influence abroad, hosting the G8 Summit 2006 and reasserting itself in post-Soviet regions. Putin circumvented the two-term limit by serving as prime minister 2008 to 2012 under ally Dmitry Medvedev, then returned to the presidency in 2012, later engineering constitutional changes that could keep him in power indefinitely. Analysts describe this evolving system as Putinism, marked by centralized rule, curtailed civil liberties, and a tightly managed political landscape. In the 21st century, Russia has sought to reassert great power status, often clashing with the West. In 2008, it fought a short war with Georgia, leaving the breakaway regions of South Ossetia and Abkhazia under Russian protection. Tensions spiked in 2014 when, after political upheaval in Ukraine, Russia annexed Crimea, the first forcible change of European borders since World War II. Moscow also backed separatists in Ukraine's Donbas region, prompting US and EU sanctions that slowed investment and growth. Yet the Crimea move boosted Vladimir Putin's popularity at home, seen by many Russians as correcting a Soviet-era wrong. Seeking to counter US influence globally, Russia intervened in Syria's civil war, 2015, to support the Assad regime, signaling a return to Middle Eastern geopolitics. Domestically, the Kremlin promoted conservative nationalism, Orthodox revival, and Soviet nostalgia while tightening control. Presidential terms were extended, dissent labeled extremist, and opposition leaders such as Alexei Navalny jailed or sidelined. Corruption and economic dependence on oil and gas persisted despite high-profile modernization goals. In February 2022, Putin escalated dramatically by launching a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, transforming the simmering conflict of 2014 into Europe's largest war since World War II. Western nations imposed sweeping sanctions, cutting Russian banks off from global finance, restricting technology exports, and limiting oil purchases. Fierce Ukrainian resistance turned what Moscow expected to be a quick victory into a grinding conflict, isolating Russia from much of the West while driving it toward closer ties with countries such as China. Today, Russia stands at a crossroads. Putin's long rule has restored a sense of stability and national pride compared with the turmoil of the 1990s, but at the cost of political freedom and rule of law. The country projects itself as a champion of a multipolar world, relying on energy wealth and military strength, even as it grapples with sanctions, corruption, and a war whose outcome will shape its future place between Europe and Asia. From the first wooden fortresses of Kievan Rus to the glass towers of modern Moscow, Russia's past is a testament to unrelenting transformation. Across more than a millennium, it has absorbed invasions, toppled dynasties, endured revolutions, and rebuilt itself again and again. Each era, imperial grandeur, Soviet superpower, and the complex present, has left enduring marks on its culture and its people. Today, as Russia navigates a rapidly changing world, it carries with it the echoes of this long history. A vast land shaped by resilience and reinvention, forever balancing its European and Asian identities and forever seeking to define its own destiny.